Hey everybody, welcome back to Mac and Mike. I'm Mike and that guy is Mac. We're doing a remote today. And today's subject is going to be about Donald Trump's takeover of the Washington, D.C. police. I I know that I'm really sort of amped up about this because there's so much criticism coming his way. But what I've noticed is in the media, the people that are protesting, the handfuls that are there, are mostly white. Now, there are some blacks, but the population, you have to understand the demographic of DC is like 46, 47% black, 36% white, and the rest others. But why is it at the protests, Mac, we see all these white people, but we only see a handful of black people since it's a majority city of blacks?
Mike, people can complain about what Donald Trump's doing all day long, but the people who live there, the majority of the people who live in the District of Columbia, they don't care whether you're white or black. They want safe streets and they want to be able to drive their car, park their car, go to the park, walk down the street without being hassled, without being, obstructed, without being assaulted. And that's pretty much what anybody wants in any city anywhere. And, when our forefathers, when they decided to create the District of Columbia, it was a very smart idea on their part because they did not want the District of Columbia. It was supposed to be managed and governed by the House of Representatives, by the Congress. And the reason it was supposed to be that way is so that they would not upset the balance of the political balance within the halls of Congress. This having a mayor and a town council in the District of Columbia, it's a relatively new phenomenon. I was alive when this happened, Mike. This is not news to me. I was on my way to Fort Dix, New Jersey, for basic training, and the people in Washington D.C. were running around with license plates on their car, and you'll love this, right? Because of the connotations it entails. It said no taxation without representation. Well, that's exactly what the colonists said to England. When we formed this nation, and the Revolutionary War was fought. And basically, what the people of the District of Columbia were saying is, "Hey, look, we pay taxes and we don't have a representative in Congress. We don't have our own government. So instead of having just a commission established by the Congress, they were given a home rule charter, which allowed them to elect a mayor and a town council. Mike, to be honest with you, it's just a historical fact. I'm not trying to slam anybody. I'm not trying to disparage anybody. I'm not trying to call attention to anything other than the truth. Since 1973, the acclamation of the District of Columbia has gotten worse and worse and worse and worse with each succeeding year. Crime is up, dirt is up, homelessness is up. I mean, there's no part of that city. I can remember, Mike, this is how far back I go. I can remember when you used to be able to drive past the White House. The street was not blocked. You could literally park your car right in front of the White House. Um, so, as a matter of fact, I remember taking my family to visit the White House in the early 70s before all these security measures were put in place. But let's be honest, the District of Columbia having its own mayor and city council is a failed experiment. It's not good government. It's not, the opposite of taxation without representation. Sadly, Mike, like many northern urban centers, for the most part, and again, this is just truth, not slamming anybody, it's just the truth. Most of these urban centers in the Northeast are run completely by Democratic governments. Democratic governments are happy to be typically, all generalizations are false, including this one, but typically they're pro sanctuary city, they're pro homeless people living on the streets in tent cities, they're pro not enforcing the laws because in California, you remember when they said, "Oh, we're not sending the police out if it's less than $1,000 of shoplifting." Well, that's an invitation for people to steal $950 worth of stuff, right? And that's what goes on in the District of Columbia. It's a mess. And after, if you count since 1973, that's almost 50 years of actually it's more than 50 years of inept government where the people who live there have paid many, many ways while they're still paying taxes.
Yeah, so what do you think about their argument? I know what I think, that crime is down. So, I mean, for our listeners that are not paying attention to this, go ahead and explain how this actually works.
Mike, all you need to do is realize that the guy that was responsible for collecting and publishing crime data in the District of Columbia was just fired because he was falsifying crime reports. I mean, that's not an opinion. That's not Alan McCormick saying that. That's not Max saying, "Hey, they're cooking the books in D.C." That's an actual crime for which somebody was fired from their job because they were publishing false information. Um, if don't if you don't arrest and prosecute people for small crimes, then they're not reported as crimes. There's a story here, I don't know, a week, 10 days ago. You remember when Doge came to town and they brought in that group of young men? I think it was men, it might have been men and women, but a bunch of young people who were really, really good at coding, right? And remember how they went in and they found all this, graft and corruption, and I won't call it corruption. Let's just call it, you know, poor accounting for federal dollars. Um, one of the this guy, one of the guys who was a member of that team, was driving down the street and he saw a bunch of 13 and 14-year-olds who were trying to carjack a young African American woman who was pregnant. Okay, so she's yelling, I'm pregnant, leave me alone, don't hit me." She's screaming for dear life and for her car. And this guy jumps out of his car and he tries to help this young African American woman who's from being carjacked by 10 or 12 or 14, 13 and 14-year olds. Now, there's so many questions in that environment. What are 13 and 14-year olds running around like a pack of wolves preying on some woman trying to steal her car? Why are they beating up a pregnant black woman in the middle of the day in the middle of the street because they want to steal her car? What gives them that kind of audacity that they think they can do that with impunity? Well, I'll tell you what gives them that. Nothing happens in the District of Columbia. They may arrest them, but they're juveniles. They let them out the next day. That's the whole no bail, no jail time that so many of these northern cities with lax criminal codes are doing. And by the way, sometimes the law is clear. They're supposed to be arrested and put in jail and go to court, but the enforcement falls to the people in the district attorney's office and in the police department. And many times it's the lawyers, not the police, but the lawyers who are letting these kids go free. So the long and short of it is this young man was trying to help this pregnant African American, got the crap beat out of him, broken ribs, broken, fractured nose. I mean, these 13 and 14-year-old gang members beat the living crap out of him when he was trying to help a woman escape what was obviously a very violent crime. That's what goes on in the city, Mike. And guess what? I just saw, they have a train station there in Washington, D.C. And if you've been to the train station any time in the last 6 months, you would have seen Tent City on the outside of the train station. All these homeless people living in tents and lean-tos and, tarps pulled over, shipping crates. And that's how people were living. You would think people wouldn't like that. You would think people wouldn't like that because it's a shame to have people living in those conditions. It's also a shame for people who want to go to the train station to have to wade through this morass of indigent people who are harassing them. And sometimes it's drug addicts, sometimes it's mental health patients. So it's a horrible environment in many different ways. And then You have now today, ever since Trump took control, what he did, he sent like 800 National Guard. I think they were military police, but they were National Guard troops. Guess what happened? They cleaned it all up. It's not there anymore, Mike. And all it takes is someone with the will and the determination to make a difference. And Donald Trump is doing that. Our nation's capital should be pristine. Our nation's capital should be the best possible capital it can be, you know? And people should want to come here, and people should have a good time when they're here, and they should have a pleasant experience when they're here, shouldn't they?
You would think, and it's funny that you said the juveniles, because there's that contrast of the New Jersey Democrat mayor who is now looking to hold even parents responsible to some degree for what their children do. So, I mean, wherever you stand on that, there's pros and cons to that, but that just shows you that there are even extremes within the Democrat community. So you think, like you said, most Democrats want law and order. Most poor black people. I mean, 90. I looked this up before the call. 96 to 97% of the crime is blacks. Who are they committing it against? 80 to 90% black.
Yeah.
So for anyone to say that Trump is a racist, let's see. I think Trump is saving more black lives than BLM ever dreamed of,
Yeah,
in their taking money from all these people. So, this is what the thing that really outrages me, Mac, is when they call him a racist over this kind of thing. And it's only white people, or mainly white people out there complaining about it. Black people want to be safe. I mean,
yes.
the
They're
crime,
like anybody else.
like anybody else.
Yeah.
And if you had that, if it was 90%, 96% white people, and I lived in a white neighborhood and the crime was 80 to 90%, I would want the president to step in, regardless of the race. It doesn't matter. So to call him a racist is just ludicrous. I think the Democrats are really losing the battle on the crime front. And maybe that's one of the reasons this Democrat mayor in New Jersey said, hey, maybe there is something to this. We need to sort of start holding parents a little bit accountable for what their children do. Now, that's a different subject and maybe one worthy about talking on another segment. But yeah, I just can't get over the amount of lies. And as you said, that Michael Pullian guy, he was cooking the books. So the other argument is, well, even if he was cooking the books, the rates of crime have been coming down. Well, the rates of crime are just matching 2020 now. I mean, they rose over COVID. So it's no better. It's no better than it was. It's you're taking that down 30% from where? Oh, the top, the high. And now it's like it's like the number of people killed reaching a 50-year high. So,
And when
yeah,
you talk about the guy that falsified the records, Mike, there's an old saying that goes, figures don't lie, but liars can figure.
yeah.
And I guess what I'm saying is that the claims of the officials who wanted the crime to be down, and that's really the government in DC, and that's systematic throughout the government. It's not just one guy. Everybody knew what was going on. They just wink, wink, you know, they allowed it to go on because it was to their benefit to tell that lie. And my point is that if you talk to the people who live there, if you talk to the people in the streets, they understand that it's not better, that it is higher. Oh, by the way, no one's talked about this aspect of it, but I do believe it's part of it. A few years ago, the Washington NFL football team moved out of the city of Washington and it moved to Maryland,
Mhm.
to a new football stadium in Maryland. They just voted hundreds of millions of dollars to refurbish and to rebuild old JFK Stadium in Washington and bring the Washington Commanders, what used to be the Washington Indian, or the Washington
Redskins.
Redskins. I got confused with Cleveland for a minute.
Yeah.
The Washington Redskins back to the city. And I will tell you, no one has said this, but I really believe that that's a part of what's going on. If you're, the NFL, whatever you think about it, whatever your attitude about it, whether it's good or bad, I really don't care. Whether you're a fan of the NFL or not, what the NFL is very, very good at is marketing itself. And when they refurbish and rebuild JFK Stadium and they have 100,000 people visiting the city of Washington, D.C. to watch football games, they're going to want those fans, those tourists who are coming into the city for the football game to be safe. And I honestly, Mike, no one has said this out loud, but I think that's part of the reason why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing. I mean, this lawlessness, this homelessness, this lack of respect for the rule of law in Washington D.C. You know, people probably don't remember. Some may, but Marion Barry was the mayor of New York City.
Washington.
I'm sorry, thank you, Washington D.C. Marion Barry was the mayor of Washington D.C. And they caught him in a hotel smoking crack in a crack pipe that he brought into the hotel room, along with the crack that he brought into the hotel room. And he was there with women who were being paid for their services. Okay. And they had this on video. This is not testimony of somebody saying, I saw it. They have it on video, they have the actual videotape. He went to prison. When he got out of prison, they reelected a mayor of Washington, D.C. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Now, I don't I don't live in Washington, D.C., but if the people who live there want that kind of person to be their mayor, I guess they're entitled to have it. But that's one of the many reasons why this home rule charter that Congress gave to Washington, D.C. in 1973 is a failure. It's a failed experiment. We wanted to give the people of Washington, D.C. an opportunity to govern themselves, to manage themselves, to take care of their own business, and not have to be managed as our founding fathers, as the forefathers of this great nation thought it should be. They didn't want it to be a state. They didn't want it to be a city. They wanted it to be a unique organism called a district and to be managed by the Congress. And we just got to call it what it is, Mike. We gave the city the opportunity to manage and rule themselves through a home rule, and they failed. And in order to maintain the integrity of our nation's capital, what Donald Trump did was necessary. It wasn't optional, it was necessary. And I would be more than happy to debate anybody that wants to debate that fact.
Yeah. What do you think? I believe in the House, they're drafting a bill to give Trump at least 6 more months to get Washington, D.C. under control. Everybody knows this is not going to be completely cleaned up in a month. And you have to establish new guidelines. And they have to deal with the issue of juvenile crime. You know, it was the town council or whoever that passed that. And from what I understand, the House, not the Senate, but the House has always been able to veto anything done by the town council. I don't know why they didn't do it. And I think if they have the power, they better add that to the bill.
Because it's politically inconvenient to do so, you
Well,
know?
it's Republican now, so they should. I mean, even though it's a small majority.
No, 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 no. The government of District of Columbia is predominantly African American and predominantly Democrat. So the problem here, Mike, and it's worse if it's Republican Congress. Now all of a sudden it becomes a race issue if they try to grasp control from the African American Democrats who are currently running things, you know? And that's just the reality of it. It
Well,
shouldn't be a political issue. It shouldn't, but it is, and it would be if they did that.
well,
But I'll be honest with you,
go
Mike.
ahead.
They should eliminate the mayor. They should eliminate the town council. They should eliminate it all and go back to the commission that used to govern the city. Put the police under the House under control of the House of Representatives. put, everything else, all the government services under a commission that reports to the House of Representatives. And honestly, Mike, I think you'd see it get cleaned up. There, I can't tell you the number of Northeast cities, unfortunately predominantly Democrat, that there's all kinds of graft and corruption that runs rampant. That's not unique to Democrats. Republicans do it too.
Mhm.
But the Northeast urban centers tend to be run by Democrats.
Yeah. One of the things that you said earlier about the political implications of a Republican House overriding a 90% Democrat town council and district, I think we're seeing a growing trend, Mac, that people are starting to follow a Trumpian type view of things. When the adults come home and they have to take care of business and the kids have been unruly and they destroyed the house, it's going to be real unpopular with the kids for a while.
Yeah,
But you have to suffer with your kids being angry at you a while so that you can restore order in your own home.
yeah.
And I think Republican House members should keep that in mind and not act like Democrats. There's a funny show I watched, South Park, and there's an episode where they call this guy Cartman. He's so unruly with his mother, he gets everything he wants, and they call in who was the dog whisperer? I can't remember his name. So she calls in the dog whisperer to train her son. It's just a very, very interesting episode. And it works for a while until the end. Then she becomes weak again and starts giving him everything he wants after she had the perfect son. So it just goes to show that, these types of things I think, Mac, need to be sustained and sustainable for a long enough period of time where law and order becomes the new normal. That this kind of crime is not tolerated. Everybody says, well, it's less. Even if it is, it's still way too much. It's like saying the Titanic is 90% filled with water versus 100%.
Yeah,
Either way, it's going to sink.
yep. Mike, again, when politics creeps into things, I saw Hakeem Jeffries on television literally screeching that Donald Trump is on a power trip and he wants to take over Washington, D.C. I'm going to tell you something, and I believe this. I don't think Donald Trump wants the headaches to go along with governing Washington, D.C. any more than he wants another hole in his head. He's already got two ears, a nose, and a mouth. He doesn't need another hole in the head. And who wants to willingly take on the many and various headaches that are associated with governing that rat infested rat hole that is the District of Columbia? Well, I'll tell you, I give Donald Trump a tremendous amount of credit for the fortitude that he's shown. Everyone, initially, immediately, everyone is criticizing. Now, I just want to call out after a couple of days, there are one or two people in some of the left-leaning media, especially the Washington media, that are saying, there really is a crime problem here, and if some of the things that Donald Trump are doing will reduce crime, that would probably be a good thing. I mean, they're not giving him a ringing endorsement, but they're not complaining about it anymore either. And the Hakeem Jeffries screed was just beyond the pale. How can anyone honestly still want to be a Democrat when they side with the criminals? Does that make any sense to you at all?
Yeah, that's what I mean. They're losing the debate, and it's happening not just in Washington. I think it's happening in cities. We'll see what happens in New York cities with their communist mayor if they actually have it. But on a side note, which we only have like a minute and 54 seconds left, one of the interesting things that happened today, I've been following, by the way, for our audience, this is the day Trump is meeting with Putin.
Yes.
And Hillary Clinton, I was surprised, said that if he's able to pull this off, even she will nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. Which, see, that's what Democrats should do. When you're doing the right thing, they should encourage it. How do they
Yeah.
ever think they're going to win back the voters if they don't start siding with the actual people?
Right. Right. When you see something good happening, endorse it. You
Yeah,
want more of something, then you compliment it. You want less of something, you tax it.
yeah, yeah. It's sticks and carrots. You encourage good behavior and you punish Bad behavior. Hell, if it was up to me, Mac, I'd go back to putting these kids in the stocks. Let people go and throw tomatoes at them for just 24 hours, just for being out after curfew or something. Here you
Yeah.
go. Just a little bit more punishment and a little corrective behavior there.
Well, that peer pressure comes into play then too. Their friends come around laughing at them, and
Yeah,
nobody wants.
that's good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Should
Your
we wrap
final
it?
thoughts. You got 30 seconds, my friend.
Let's wrap it up. Let's
You
go. Go Donald Trump. Go DC. Mac and Mike.
out.
Oh.